This is the new Express LRS module from Axis Flying, and when I found out how much Axis Flying wants to charge you for this module, my jaw hit the floor. You see, there's lots of different reasons why you might choose Crossfire, Tracer, Express LRS, Ghost, why you might choose one of those over the others. But cost has always been something that Express LRS has solidly beat the others on. And the reason for that is that all of the Express LRS software development is done for free by the open source project. And so any manufacturer can come along and just slap together an Express LRS module or receiver and sell it basically for the cost of the hardware. And the downside of that is that you sometimes get hardware that has problems. Happy model receivers with messed up voltage regulators that burn the receiver, beta FPV modules with capacitors that are wrong on the circuit board, which means you can't flash the module. These are all things that have actually happened, and more that I don't need to list here. So what Axis Flying seems to be doing by charging $120 for this module, that's more than a Crossfire module, that's more than a Ghost module. What they seem to be doing is saying, okay, Express LRS community, do you actually want high quality, reliable hardware that performs, and are you interested in actually paying for it? Well, are you? I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. The Axis Flying Express LRS module that I'm reviewing in this video was sent to me by Axis Flying for the purpose of this review. I have not received any cash or any other form of compensation in exchange for this video, and no one has had any approval or conditions on the contents of this video before it was released. One of the first things you're going to notice about the Axis Flying Express LRS module is that it's got a very different form factor from other Express LRS modules that you've seen. We've got the standard JR module bay form factor here, but the actual module itself is this part that actually separates from the JR part and is connected by a wire. We'll talk about why it separates a little later in the video. That wire is one of the things that people are going to notice, and one of the first things I noticed about this module. So when we take and put the module into the back of the radio, the wires just kind of fold up here and kind of get squished. And in fact, if you're not careful, they may not fit down into this channel. So there's this channel here designed to hold them, but depending on what you do, you may have a problem. I'm just going to twist those up a little bit to take some of the slack out of them. And you could even, if you want to make your module look like crap, you could even take a little bit of tape and kind of tape that down so it stays out of the way. I don't know. That may be overkill. And then the module fits into the back of the radio, just like so. Now there is a good reason that they've done it this way. And the reason is that until now, it has not been possible to use Express LRS on any radio that can't run the Express LRS Lua script. And the Express LRS Lua script is used to configure certain options like the packet rate, the output power, and so forth. And in fact, in Express LRS 2.0, there are even more options that the Lua script can configure. But who cares? Because isn't everyone who's using Express LRS using an OpenTX or an EdgeTX radio, and so they can run the Lua script? What's the need for this module here on the back with the joystick and the menu? And the person who needs that is a person who has a Futaba or a Spektrum radio. Because Futaba and Spektrum radios, at least the higher end ones, can interface natively with a Crossfire module. And since Express LRS uses the Crossfire protocol to talk to the module and the receiver, that means that those radios can also be used with Express LRS, except there's a problem. Since they can't run the Lua script, you can't configure the module. Now the way that Crossfire had dealt with that is to have the big Crossfire module with the joystick and the OLED screen, and you just use that instead of the Lua script to configure all your options. And now Express LRS has got the same thing. So in case I haven't made it clear, the reason that this module pops off the JR here and you've got these separate wires is that if you had a Futaba or a Spektrum radio, you could wire this thing directly to the back of the radio. The radios come with a special plug that you use. And you could wire this thing up and stick it to the back of your radio with some double-sided tape or Velcro or something and have it on the back of your Spektrum or your Futaba radio. And 99.999% of the people watching this video, that's not relevant to. But if you are one of that small percent and you've always wanted to be able to do Express LRS, now you can. So if we long press this button to enter the menu, we can see the standard Express LRS options, like the packet rate. We can change that however we like. Left to exit the menu, up, down to change the options, right to enter the menu. Transmit power. The module does go up to 1 full watt of output power, and we're going to test a little later in the video to see if it sustains that. By the way, it also has a power saving feature where after 2 minutes, if it does not detect any receiver, then like you've just powered the radio on the bench, but your quad isn't powered up. After 2 minutes, it will go into a low power mode and it will go back to full power when it detects a receiver. In theory, if you were to crash way out in the field and failsafe, which, how do you failsafe Express LRS anyway? But in theory, if you were to failsafe far, far away and lose signal, it would go down to lower power. And I'm not sure if there's a manual way to kick it back up out of that sleep mode. Anyway, up to 1 watt of output power, at least nominal. Change the telemetry ratio. There's a motion detect feature where if the module is face down, it turns off the screen in order to save a little bit of battery power. And when the module is face up, it turns the screen back on. Fan control. The fans will automatically turn on when the module reaches, I think it's 40 degrees Celsius. Or we can manually set the fan to on, or manually set it to off. If you're going to run at high output power, you're probably going to want to leave that on, or auto. And you can manually kick it into binding mode. Binding mode, of course, with Express LRS is usually not used. You would normally use a binding phrase, which is flashed into the firmware. That's how Express LRS prefers you to do it, but if you want to manually bind and not use a binding phrase, you can do that. I have another video I made that shows how to put the Express LRS receiver into binding mode without using a binding phrase, and I'll put a link to that down in the video description below, where I always put references like that. And then finally, here is update firmware. And when we do update firmware, it starts a Wi-Fi web browser. You can then connect to that wireless network with your phone and flash firmware through your phone, like off the SD card on your phone. Or if you have a laptop or a computer with Wi-Fi, you can do it from there. You also, of course, can flash using USB. There's a USB port here, and of course you plug that right into your computer and flash it using the Express LRS configurator. While we're looking at the underside of the module, you can also see there's an XT30 plug here. The module can take up to 5S voltage. That's kind of cool. That's a higher voltage. Most modules will take only 2 or 3S. It can take up to 5S voltage, and it is advertised as having over voltage protection. I'm not going to plug a 6S in just to see if it fries and fry my only module, but you would use this if you just didn't want to be sucking down the battery on your controller quite as fast. Some people will just take some Velcro and stick an external battery into the on the back of their controller or something. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up my good old Immersion RC RF power meter, and we're going to measure the output power of the module. And standard disclaimer applies. The RF power meter is not a lab grade piece of equipment. If the output power is off by a few milliwatts, that's within the range of accuracy provided by this device. But I'm especially curious to see how consistent the output power is over time as the module heats up. The other thing I got to point out is that you are going to see me using the Lua script to adjust the settings on the module. And it's the reason I'm doing that is that it sure seems like the joystick stops working as soon as the module is actually talking to a radio. The only way I've been able to get the joystick to work is to power the module outside of the radio using the XT30 or the USB power. And I guess that's a safety precaution. Or maybe it's just they don't want to have the menus conflicting with the Lua script, so it's like you can only have one thing controlling it. But if you were hoping to be like, oh great, I hate Lua scripts, let me just buy it for an OpenTX radio and use the joystick, it sure seems like the joystick just stops working as soon as you plug it into an actual radio. So there you go. Here we are outputting 25 milliwatts, and we're seeing approximately 37 milliwatts-ish coming out. And I'm going to go ahead and crank that output power up to 50 milliwatts. And we're seeing 66-ish milliwatts. Again, I would certainly consider that to be within the range of precision of this device. And if the module is running a little higher, I think we'd all rather have a little more output power than a little bit less. We'll crank it up to 100 milliwatts. We're seeing about 140. We'll crank it up to 250 milliwatts, and yikes, that's 400 milliwatts. So maybe it's running a little hot. 500 milliwatts, and let's just go all the way to 1,000 milliwatts. Oh my goodness. Now this is the part where I'm glad that I have a 60, you can't see it, but I have a 6 dB attenuator on this thing. That is good because this little power meter isn't supposed to go over 500 milliwatts. So we're good there, but we're gonna let that run. And I mean, if we're starting at 1.4 watts, even if it does come down a little bit, I feel like we're still going to be well over a watt. But let's just let that run, and I'll come back and I'll see you in 10 or 15 minutes after it's had a little while to heat up. So here we are about 15 minutes later, and the module has pretty much stabilized at about 1.3 watts. And even given the inherent imprecision of this non-lab grade power meter, I still feel fairly confident we're outputting at least 1 watt. The fan came on after about 5 minutes, and yeah, it's not the best thing to be hearing. So I would keep the output power of the module lower unless you just absolutely need that additional penetration. I usually run my XpressLRS modules at 250 milliwatts, and I've never had an issue with range. Speaking of binding, in order to bind the module, most people are probably going to want to flash it with their binding phrase, especially as XpressLRS 2.0 has just released, and it's got some really cool new features that you're definitely going to want to take advantage of. I'm actually going to be making a release overview of XpressLRS 2.0, so definitely get subscribed and hit the notification bell down there so you don't miss it when it comes out. If you do want to flash this module, it is new enough that it is not actually listed in the XpressLRS configurator pull-down menus. There's a special procedure you have to use to flash it. You're going to go over to the Get Pull Request option, and from there you can find the pull request where the Axis Flying hardware is going to be added to the XpressLRS project, and then once you do that, you proceed and flash as usual. I do also want to point out, when we talked about the Beta FPV module, oh, here it is here. One of the things that we complained about was that Beta FPV has got custom code for this module, and they didn't coordinate with the XpressLRS devs. That's from people who work on the project. They said that. And they have not submitted a pull request, although they say that they're going to. They've not submitted a pull request to have the code for this module officially included in the XpressLRS project. So if you want to download and flash your Beta FPV module, you got to download it directly from the Beta FPV repo, which is annoying, and also, like, it's an open source project. The whole point is that you're getting all this stuff for free, Beta FPV. Give back. Why not the pull request? I don't know. But I do want to acknowledge that Axis Flying has worked very closely with the devs on this project to make this as good a module as possible. And although it is not currently as part of the XpressLRS configurator, it has been submitted. The pull request is there. It's just a matter of time. And in fact, by the time you're seeing this, you may actually see it in the official pull down menu and not need to go do that pull request thing. So check in the actual menu first. But if it's relatively recent, you may need to go do the pull request menu instead. Now, I feel like a lot of people want to see the inside of this module, so you see what you're getting for $127. And I'm going to open it up and show you, but I don't presume to have any special insight into, like, the manufacturing quality. Because, like, I looked at the inside of the Beta FPV module, and it looked pretty good to me. But, you know, there were no obvious signs of shoddy manufacturing. But, like, if there was a capacitor or a diode in the wrong place, I wouldn't know how to recognize that. I do also want to show you, before I open up the module, that they've done something. They got a little storage here for, I mean, I guess they were just like, well, the space is there, let's give you something. You can put your weed in here. You put your weed in there. That's clearly what that's for, right? Oh, wow, that's nice. I can feel that there is thread locker on there. You've got a nice iFixit toolkit. Why are you using your shitty screwdriver? So here is the internals of the module. And people who are smarter than me will have an opinion on some of the things that they see here. It's pretty cool that the fan is actually like an air intake here. It's not just a fan kind of blowing air over a heatsink, although at its essence that's what it is. Nice big custom heatsink here. The SMA connector appears to be direct soldered. It's not a UFL pigtail. That's really cool. Those UFL pigtails have a little bit of loss in them, and also the UFL connector can kind of pop off. On the flip side, if this does break, you're boned. You can't just pop off a UFL pigtail and reconnect a new one. Oh, we got this heatsink here. I don't know if I want to just... Oh, there we go. Yeah. Got some blobby solder here, that's for sure. Got a little blobby. That's an excessive amount of solder. Not the best soldering I've ever seen. A little surprised to see that, to be honest. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, should you buy it? And we have to acknowledge that for a large number of people, the answer is no freaking way. A lot of people who are interested in Express LRS are not interested in spending $120 on a controller module, no matter how good it is. They would rather buy 2 or 3 of a Beta FPV or a Happy model or a Naminmo module and take the chances. If they get a bad one, they just buy another one. But your odds of getting a good one are not that, even for Beta FPV, which I've criticized their hardware quality in the past. This is a fairly well-made module. At least this version is. The second batch, maybe they'll have some new problem. We don't know until they start hitting the streets. And that, I think, is the main thing that you're going to be paying for if you choose to spend $120 on the Axis Flying module. What Axis Flying is saying with that price point is, this is a good piece of hardware that you can rely on. So if you were the kind of person who was interested in flying a $1,000 collective pitch helicopter or a $5,000 jet or something, or you might, I don't know, Beta FPV, Happy model, and Axis Flying is saying, trust us. You can trust us. You want to pay $120 for that? The other person who's going to pay $120 for a module like this is going to be somebody who has a Futaba or a Spektrum. Bear in mind, not all of those radios will work. For the Spektrum, I'm pretty sure it's the X9D or higher. The lower ones can't do it. And for the Futaba, I think it's the 14. But you should do your research, because the lower end ones don't support Crossfire. You need a radio that will support Crossfire. And if it'll support Crossfire, then it will also support this module, and you can have Express LRS on there if you prefer, and then some people will. But I think a lot of people, the cost is going to put you off, and like, I don't know, do you really want this module hanging off the back of your radio? Well, people have been doing it with Crossfire modules for a long time, and they've been fine with it, but a lot of those people did it because they hate Lua scripts, and this one, if it's hooked up to a radio that can do the Lua script, it doesn't seem like the menu even works. I mean, I'll probably keep using it. I didn't have to spend $120 on it. It's probably the best Express LRS module you can buy today in terms of capabilities and in terms of hardware, in terms of output power and so forth. And the way that Axis Flying has worked with the Express LRS project is certainly something that I feel like supporting. But for you, who got to spend your own $120 on this, well, the Naminmo Flash module is pretty freaking good. Even this Beta FPV module looks pretty freaking good if you flash Express LRS firmware to it and not the weirdo Beta FPV firmware to it. Regardless, I've got links down in the video description if you want to pick up one of these things. And they are affiliate links. And what that means is that if you make any purchase, you want to buy this? Don't want to buy this? You want to buy anything? Want to buy some props? And for any time you go do your FPV shopping, click on one of my affiliate links first. I get a small commission off of whatever you buy. And that's a great way for you to support the channel and doesn't cost you anything extra. If you are interested in getting into Express LRS and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, I've also got some tutorials about setting up and flashing Express LRS, and I'll put links to those in the video description as well. Thanks so much for watching. Happy flying.
What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon, or like just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez.